The Borden murders of 1892, where Mr. and Mr. Borden, Mr. and Mrs. Borden died like an hour and a half between each other, the morning of August 4th, 1892. And the reason that this is a mystery is because nobody really knows who did it. The suspected murder weapon is this hatchet, but it doesn't have any blood on it, and there's only a cow hair, so there wasn't like any evidence that that was the murder weapon. This is the crime scene of Mrs. Borden. This is Mr. Borden. And Mrs. Borden had 18 to 19 hatchet wounds, depending on what source you use, and Mr. Borden had 10 hatchet wounds. Now, there's several theories for this, because again, nobody really knows who did it. Number one is that Bridget Sullivan, which is the maid of the Bordens, killed Mr. and Mrs. Borden. And so this is a theory because nobody really investigated her too much, because even though she was one of two people in the house, she wasn't really like investigated much by the police. Suspects about her, or suspicions about her, were dropped for an unknown reason, and she became a police favorite after the tragedy. She was hired by the jailkeeper of the police in their household, so there was a little bit of bias there. And also, she showed appropriate feminine behavior for the time, so nobody really thought that she was as suspicious as Lizzie was. And also, Bridget was never really taken seriously because she was just a maid, and the jury of 12 middle-class white men couldn't believe that a woman could do something like that, you know, like how brutal that murder was. So theory 2 is that Lizzie Borden did it, and Lizzie has pretty good motive. She didn't really have like a great household. She viewed her stepmom as an interloper because after her mom died, her father remarried, and so she always kind of saw her stepmom as like not a good person. And also, her parents never really threw her into like the social community. They kind of just stayed at home, and she didn't really get like a suit or anything like she thought she should have. And also, Mr. Borden was very valuable. The value of his estate at the time of his death was like $250,000 in that day's money, and it was also below market value during that time. So he was really valuable. And also, witnesses claim that Mr. Borden planned on writing a will that favored Mrs. Borden, so she was angry about that. Even though she has like really good motive, though, there's not really any evidence against her because, I mean, there is evidence now, but back then, all of the evidence that they used was not admissible in the trial, or it was explained. So like, she gave conflicting whereabouts about where she was, but people were saying that she was on medicine at that time because she was really stressed out. They were trying to like calm her down a little bit. And also, she said that there were bloody towels in the basement, but they explained that as she was having her period. And also, like, there were other things, but those are like the biggest things. But nothing was really like solid in court. So really, we just have the motive and the fact that she was very cool, had a cool composure. She didn't like freak out in public, you know. So that looked suspicious to them. So that's Lizzie Borden's theory. And my personal theory is that Mr. and Mrs. Borden faked their deaths, because there's actually a lot of evidence that can point to this. So for example, a motive for Mr. Borden was that he was like he controlled like 4 different banks. He had a lot of stock prices, or he had a lot of stock with him. He had a lot of money, and he had a dread of debt. Okay, and that's important because right after like the year 1893, there was a depression, an economic depression, and I believe that he saw the depression coming with all the signs that were showing. So, for example, there was less building activity happening. Like, it had peaked, I think, in April that year, or 1892, and then it was steadily going downwards. And since he had built his own building, he would have, like, been aware of that kind of stuff. Also, he had a lot of stock, and stock prices were falling. Stock prices kind of crested in August, which was the month that he died, and which means it was starting to go downwards. And so I believe that he kind of saw that coming, and also he didn't really like his daughter. It was kind of a cold family, so that's reason to maybe leave them behind, you know what I'm saying? And so the way he could have done this is that he had a lot of money, so he could have totally had the money to be able to like, he kept a large amount of cash on hand for opportunistic deals, and he could have had professionals to move certain bodies into the house. Because if you look at this map here, that's a really confusing layout. Okay, there's doors like to every single room. This room has 5 doors. This one has 6. So there's like several different ways you can get to each room, and so it's not unbelievable that somebody could slip bodies through the rooms that somebody wasn't in. You know what I'm saying? And also, if you look at this is the outside view of the Borden house, and if you use the side door, there's a very slim line of sight between, like, if you're sitting on the street, you can only go like for certain amount of space before you can't see the door. So like, everyone was shocked that nobody saw anybody like in broad daylight do this, but it makes sense because there's not really a big line of sight that you can see the door with. And so it makes sense to have some people get the bodies in unnoticed. And also, Mr. Borden was a mortician earlier in his life. So he had experience with dead bodies, and a quote from the book says, he wanted a safe and certain business, and since nothing in life is more certain than death, he became a mortician. And so he would have had experience, he would have had knowledge, he would have had contacts. So it's not unbelievable that he had contacts from that business that had access to bodies. And also, the crime scene, there's no blood splattered, so there could have, that explains why there's no blood splatter, because the bodies were moved there rather than killed right there. And also, the murders were so brutal and inhuman that it might have been a little bit hard to recognize who they were. So it could have been said that they just hacked 2 different people, and I don't know, made the parts that were visible look a little bit like Mr. and Mrs. Borden. So it's not unbelievable that they could have faked the deaths. Now, some people don't really think about this kind of theory because everyone's focused on Lizzie, whether Lizzie did it or Lizzie didn't do it or whatever. But no one really thinks about that they might have had a part to play in it. And also, some people would be doubting that the bodies, the state of the bodies and how they looked to be just killed. But I think with Mr. Borden's contacts, surely there was somebody back then that helped people disappear. Okay, and there's as much chance that there was as there wasn't, because if there was, we wouldn't know about it, because there's no evidence that somebody succeeded because they succeeded, you know what I'm saying? So there's a pretty good chance that they faked their own death. And yeah, that's my references up there, and thank you.